we go back to another money grab. I mean, another fantasy TV show that that was made for entirely artistic reasons. There's a really good artistic reason for this TV show to exist, and this is House of the Dragon. So, Holly, tell us about House of the Dragon.
I have seen this as well. So I've
Oh,
seen the whole series as well.
oh, Sharon, you've seen it as well. Okay, cool. So both
Yeah.
of you, tell me about House of the Dragon. Try and convince me to watch this thing.
Well, all right,
Try-
I'll give an initial bit of context before handing over to Sharon, who will articulate things far better than I can at the moment. Um, House of the Dragon is a prequel to Game of Thrones.
I wonder why they made this show.
I know, it's really surprising, isn't it? I know you weren't expecting that.
What?
It's really out of the blue, and is set approximately 300 years before Game of Thrones, focusing on the Targaryen dynasty at a point where they head for some really epic infighting. It's based upon a prequel that, an epic prequel history that George R.R. Martin has written called
Fire and Blood.
which is, and I have sitting around here somewhere, and I've read
It is a massive doorstop of a book.
brilliant.
My wife has read it.
I'm going to say I like it in some ways and not in others. Gosh, there's a fence sitting statement there.
Well, the book or the TV show.
I'm just going to say the book,
Yeah.
but it's extremely irritating that he went off and pissed around with writing that rather than getting on and finishing Game of Thrones.
Like Winds of Winter.
Yeah. He's pulling what I think of as a Robert Jordan with the Wheel of Time and basically dying before it's finished and having had somebody else primed to finish off writing it.
He obviously doesn't know how to end it.
Well, yeah, exactly. He sort of knows how to end it, but he also can't be bothered, which is, leads to sloppy writing. And I think he may have, missed the boat really with the series having finished. But, that aside, I think it is indicative of, George R.R. Martin's, weird lack of focus that we've ended up with this as well. I am now going to hand over to Sharon to provide more, profound insights, and then I'll just, shout incoherently at times.
Yeah, this is one of those dramas where it's you're watching it, and if you know what happens in Game of Thrones, you're trying to make that connect between how the Targaryens seemingly are invincible in this, and yet you meet Daenerys Targaryen at the beginning of Game of Thrones, living in exile in isolation with no dragons, and then until she gets the dragon eggs,
and the only one around.
Yeah, and so the only Targaryen living, and then suddenly you find we are back these several hundred years beforehand, when there are like a dozen dragons, there are a dozen dragon riders, and there's this large dynasty of Targaryens seemingly invincible. And I think the House of Dragon, you could almost call it like the decline and fall of the House of Targaryen as well, because that seems to be, it's like charting the point from where they were at their, not their peak, but where they seem to be almost invincible, to how you see them to become what Daenerys is.
Yeah.
And so you meet this sort of this dynasty with I get the names muddled up because they're simply so similar, but I think it's Aegon. Is
So
king.
the king is Viserys is
Viserys is king.
There's Viserys, there's Aegon, there's Daemon.
yeah.
Yeah, so you have a king, and when you first meet him, he's only got one daughter, and he has had no living son. And so for every king throughout history, the driving force has been to provide an heir, so you can ensure that your legacy continues. So that is basically the start, and when things start to fall apart in the House of Targaryen in this instance.
And may I
carry on
and say that he had gained the throne by dint of being a boy as well, of being a man as well. But there had previously been a toss-up between a granddaughter and a grandson, where the granddaughter was older, and it went to him because the nobles preferred a man.
They wanted a king. So it was like we know that George R.R. Martin was drawing inspiration from early English history. So this is classic sort of Empress Maud, Queen Maud and Empress Matilda territory, where she was the heir to the throne, and yet a civil war was fought because they did not want a queen on the throne, even though she was the only heir and so it went to King Stephen and all that like malarkey. So we know it. We can see the reflections in our own history here in Britain. Anyway, so his wife dies horribly in childbirth, and he's left with one sort of semi-grown-up teenage daughter, and he declares her as his heir. There's various maneuverings, and eventually he has been found by maneuverings a young wife, and then she proceeds to produce a number of male children for him. So you then have this conflict between the person who has been declared his heir, who's a female, and the fact that he has got 2 or 3 natural born sons who in an order in primogeniture, because they're male, they would immediately step above his daughter. But because he has formally named her his heir, she should inherit regardless of whatever else happens. And so the stories, it's quite a slow build. You begin to see these rival camps between these 2 women. Really, they're the main characters. You've got the Queen Alicent, who's married to the king, and you've got his daughter. Her name escapes me. It's a Targaryen name.
Rhaenyra,
that's it. So you basically see them forming their own dynasties of their own. Rhaenyra has a political marriage to her cousin. All the Targaryens sort of intermarry, and she has this. But he is gay, and so he can't, or he's trying to consummate the marriage, but it's just his heart's not in it. And so she has basically a lover. Shall we say it that way?
Sorry, that's just a brilliant way of saying it. Try to convince him, but his heart's just not in it.
That's not happening. And so she actually forms a relationship with one of her guards, the head of the Gold Cloaks, and she has a number of sons with him who, because she is married, they become her husband's children, so they become her heirs.
Yeah.
But it's widely known that basically the father of these children is not her husband.
Yeah.
And so she has this sort of dynasty below her where she's the heir, but she's saying that my throne, when I become queen, is going to pass to my son, who is a Targaryen through her blood, but not a Targaryen through her husband's blood.
Yeah.
Because in fact,
and then you've got the
Targaryen himself. He's a Valarian, but his
Valarian. Which is from Old Valyria.
Okay. We're back in the realms of geography. We're back in the realms of a TV show needing its own. I mean, that's one of the things. I remember with Game of Thrones, where probably 3 or 4 episodes in, I realized that the opening sequences are essentially just a geography map telling you this is where we're going to be in this episode. Yeah. Because we know it's confusing.
I think that's all we've been. Yeah, it's confusing. So basically, it becomes where we've got. I think it becomes this like war of these 2 dynasties, these 2 women. You've got Mrs. With her children, and then you've got the sort of Targaryen children. And you can see that this is setting up, it's going to become a battle. And as the drama goes over about 20 years. So you see them when they're very young to when they're mature, and it's like the last years of the king's life. And you can see how these 2 camps are forming. There's this sort of group surrounding the blonde Targaryens almost, and then you can see this other camp forming around the black Targaryens, so that you've got this battle is coming, and yet you're still waiting for that breach. At the moment, there's sort of through the different episodes, you can see where the crack is beginning to form, and then it's widening, but you don't actually see that complete breach until towards the end of the series. So it's the setting up of a major civil war within the Targaryens and dragging all the rest of Westeros in with it.
And right there, you put your finger on why I might never watch this show. Because that is the thing. We know we're going towards this thing. We know we're going towards this breach. But this is an American TV show, and this show exists purely to cash in on the fact that Game of Thrones is a big, massive hit, and they don't want to let go of that cash cow, so they've made another thing that's made in that universe, and you know they're going to drag this thing out. So I can guarantee you that by the end of this season, this conflict doesn't happen, and it's kind of like come back for season 2 for more conflict. Am I right?
Yeah, it comes.
I knew it.
You don't. I would say this is almost like a prequel to the next. This is like building up to the big stuff which is probably going to come in the next season.
What is referred to as the Dance of the Dragons is. But it works well. That's the thing. It gives. Yes, it's a prequel, and it is obviously a delightful cash cow. But it wouldn't. You couldn't do it faster.
You need to sort of you are sowing the seeds, aren't you? You reap what you sow. So they are sowing the seeds of what is, and you can see that it's because of this. They've had this inbreeding. The Targaryen thing is that you marry your brother. You see brothers and sisters get married and have children, and you see that Daemon Targaryen marries his niece, who's played by Rhaenyra Targaryen. I never get the names right. They marry each other and they have children. So it's this interbreeding that we know the downfall of the House of the Dragon is madness most of the time, brought on by inbreeding.
They say that when a Targaryen's born, the gods toss a coin.
Toss a coin, yeah. So whether it's going to be mad or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So fine. I mean, did you enjoy it? How many stars would you give it?
Yes, 4. I really liked it, and I like the fact that it gave you that slow burn, because, as you said, you saw bits that happened earlier on, and you could see how it compounded, how small things became bigger and bigger and bigger, and what should have not been a problem becomes. You can see that you can see the storm brewing,
and that missed opportunities where the things could have been different, but there were missed opportunities, as there are with a lot of sort of George R.R.'s sort of writings. You think, it is. We talk about this all the time, don't we, about sort of Chekhov's gun, that how something you see in the first act, there's going to be repercussions for that later on, and so you see events in more or less the first episode that you think that is the seed being sown there, and then that's going to be you're going to reap that later. So I liked it. I thought, again, it was a slow burn. At the beginning, I was thinking, the first couple of episodes, I was thinking, are we ever going to get a episode 9 type event?
Oh, used
to in the Game of Thrones. It's all happened in episode 9. Then you sort of saw a bit of the consequences in episode 10. Yeah. But it was all to build up. I thought, is it going to be like this slow burn? And I don't think there really was, but I think that sort of slow build is because I think they're looking at this not over a sort of one series, but probably looking over 4 or 5 realistically. So even though I haven't read that book, because I got to the point where I'm thinking, if you're not going to publish Winds of Winter, I'm never going to read anything you ever write again. So you if you don't, I've had enough of you. If you don't,
Sharon, when you said that when you said that they're looking at this over like maybe 4 or 5 years, both my face and my soul did a massive eye roll.
We'll be talking to you about it again.
Yes, yeah. and I will be ignoring it again. I'll be ignoring it again until, like with Game of Thrones, my wife sits me down and says, I want to watch this thing. And I'll be like, oh, fine, I guess I should do something with you. But
so taking all that into account, I would probably still give it a 4, because I think it kept me going. And someone who has been completely alienated by the whole Game of Thrones things, because I was a book reader first, and then it was like, don't do this to me, and you just went and did it. So I was, against my sort of will almost. I liked it, so I'll just give it a 4.
Okay,
and I think cool. Sean cast his vote as well, and he said he liked it. And
yes,
well, you've got Sean's quote, haven't you, Holly?
I have. He says, "Slow burn, but pays off in the end. Big 4 stars from."